The USA top dog? For now. Okay, let's be real, America is kind of a big deal, like the Beyoncé of nations. Everyone knows them, everyone has an opinion on them, and they've definitely had their fair share of #1 hits, and some epic fails, let's be honest. We're talking military might, economic dominance, Hollywood blockbusters, the whole shebang. But what if, just like Beyoncé's Destiny's Child days, it all came to an end? Stick with me here, folks. What if the good old US of A decided to call it quits and split into, say, 5, 6, or even more separate countries? Cue the dramatic music because things are about to get interesting. This isn't just some political drama playing out on cable news. This is the kind of stuff that could reshape the entire planet. Fasten your seatbelts, kids. We're about to dive deep into the wild world of what if the USA split up? Let's get one thing straight. Splitting up a country, especially one as large and diverse as the United States, wouldn't be pretty. The sheer complexity of such an endeavor is mind-boggling. We're talking about a nation with over 330 million people, each with their own unique backgrounds, beliefs, and aspirations. It would make Brexit look like a casual breakup after a Tinder date gone wrong. Imagine the chaos, the confusion, and the sheer emotional turmoil that would ensue. Think years of political wrangling, legal battles that would make your head spin, and enough finger-pointing to put a kindergarten class to shame. The legal system would be overwhelmed, and the political landscape would be more divided than ever. But for the sake of this thought experiment, let's imagine they somehow got it done. Maybe through some miraculous consensus or a series of compromises that would make history books. Maybe it's a peaceful separation, dreaming big here. Or maybe it's a whole messy ordeal with more drama than a Real Housewives reunion. The streets could be filled with both celebrations and protests, a true reflection of the nation's diverse opinions. Either way, we're left with a bunch of new countries carved out of what used to be one big, powerful nation. Each new country would have its own government, its own laws, and its own way of life. We'd have the West Coasters, sipping their lattes and coding their way to a new tech utopia. Silicon Valley would likely become the epicenter of innovation, attracting talent from all over the world. The Texans, bigger and bolder than ever, with enough oil money to make a Saudi prince blush. Texas could become an economic powerhouse, leveraging its natural resources and independent spirit. And let's not forget the good old South, clinging to their traditions and maybe a few Confederate flags for dear life. The South would likely emphasize its cultural heritage, perhaps even more so than before. It's a whole new world order, people. The geopolitical landscape would be forever altered, with new alliances and rivalries forming. And trust me, the rest of the planet is watching with a mix of fascination and a healthy dose of, oh crap, what's going to happen now? The global community would be on edge, wondering how this monumental shift will impact international relations, trade, and security. Picture this. The United Nations, once a relatively straightforward playground for global diplomacy, is suddenly flooded with new kids on the block. Each of these new American nations wants a seat at the table, a voice in the global conversation, and maybe even a veto power or two. Talk about a power shift. Suddenly those long-standing alliances? Yeah, they're up in the air. Does France still have America's back if America is now 6 different countries with their own agendas? Do old rivalries resurface as new nations try to find their footing on the world stage? One thing's for sure, the world just got a whole lot more complicated. International relations become a tangled web of new treaties, shifting loyalties, and enough backroom deals to make even the most seasoned diplomat reach for a stiff drink. And let's not even get started on the military implications. Does each new country get a piece of the US military pie? Who gets the nukes? Suddenly, questions that seemed unthinkable before are front-page news. Section 4. Trade wars. Who wins when everyone plays defense? Okay, let's talk money, honey. In the world of economics, money isn't just a tool. It's the lifeblood that keeps everything moving. The US economy, for all its flaws, is a behemoth. It's a giant that influences markets, sets trends, and drives innovation across the globe. It's the engine that drives global trade, and its currency, the mighty dollar, is basically the world's piggy bank. Countries around the world hold dollars in reserve, and international transactions often rely on it. But what happens when you break that engine into several smaller, less powerful parts? Imagine the chaos that would ensue if the US economy were to fragment. Get ready for a global economic rollercoaster ride, folks. Markets would become unpredictable, and the stability we've come to rely on would be a thing of the past. Suddenly, those free trade agreements that used to be the envy of the world are about as useful as a screen door on a submarine. They'd be rendered ineffective, leading to a breakdown in international cooperation. Each new American nation wants to protect its own interests, which means tariffs, trade barriers, and a whole lot of economic uncertainty. This protectionism would stifle trade and create bottlenecks in the supply chain. Remember those cheap Chinese goods you love to hate? They're affordable because of the current trade agreements. Well, get ready to pay a whole lot more for them. Prices would skyrocket as tariffs and trade barriers increase costs. And that goes for everything else too. Everyday items would become more expensive, leading to a decrease in consumer spending and a potential economic downturn. Global supply chains, already reeling from years of pandemics and political instability, are thrown into complete chaos. Factories would shut down and shipping ports would become congested, further exacerbating the problem. Some countries might see an opportunity in all this. They could try to fill the void left by a fragmented US economy. China, for example, could swoop in and try to assert its dominance in a world suddenly lacking a clear economic leader. They'd aim to become the new center of global trade. The European Union, with its own internal squabbles to contend with, might find itself struggling to compete in this new fragmented global market. Their unity would be tested like never before. One thing's for sure, the days of the US dollar reigning supreme are over. The world would shift towards a multipolar currency system, with no single currency dominating the market. Get ready for a multipolar world where economic power is spread out, competition is fierce, and nobody knows quite what the future holds. The landscape of global trade would be forever changed, and we'd all have to adapt to a new reality. Section 5. Wall Street's Wild Ride. Brace for impact. Wall Street, baby! The epicenter of global finance, where dreams are made and shattered in the blink of an eye. The beating heart of American capitalism, where fortunes are made and lost on a whim. It's a place of high stakes and even higher stress, where every tick of the stock ticker can mean the difference between riches and ruin. But what happens to this financial powerhouse when the very foundation it's built on, a united and powerful United States, crumbles beneath its feet? The stability that Wall Street relies on is suddenly thrown into disarray. Imagine the chaos stock markets plunge into freefall as investors, panicking like a herd of startled gazelles, dump US assets faster than you can say subprime mortgage crisis. The panic spreads like wildfire, igniting fear and uncertainty across the globe. The value of the dollar plummets, sending shockwaves through global markets. The once mighty greenback, a symbol of economic stability, is now in freefall, dragging down economies worldwide. Suddenly, that safe haven status the US dollar enjoyed for decades is about as reliable as a weather forecast in a hurricane. Investors scramble for alternatives, but the damage is already done. But it's not just Wall Street that feels the burn. The ripple effects are felt far and wide, touching every corner of the globe. Remember those developing countries that rely on US aid and investment? Their fragile economies are hit hardest, as the financial lifeline they depended on is suddenly severed. Yeah, they're in for a rough ride too. The economic instability leads to social unrest, as people struggle to make ends meet in an increasingly uncertain world. Suddenly that lifeline of financial support is gone, leaving them vulnerable to economic shocks and political instability. The absence of aid exacerbates existing problems, creating a vicious cycle of poverty and desperation. And let's not forget about all those American companies with global operations. These corporations, once the epitome of efficiency and profitability, now face unprecedented challenges. Suddenly, they're not just dealing with one set of regulations and tax laws, but potentially dozens, as each new American nation tries to get its piece of the corporate pie. The complexity of navigating this new landscape is staggering. Talk about a logistical nightmare. Supply chains are disrupted, costs skyrocket, and the once smooth flow of goods and services grinds to a halt. The bottom line is this: a fractured USA means a fractured global economy. The interconnectedness of our world means that no one is immune to the fallout. Buckle up, buttercups, because it's going to be a bumpy ride. The road ahead is uncertain, and the only thing we can be sure of is that the impact will be felt far and wide.